trimming the cases to length and chamfering the necks. Here I'm back at the bench and I've got a Lee zip trim, this little hand pull trimmer. So I'm trimming the case to length there, chamfering the inside of the case, chamfering the outside of the case, and as an added bonus you can take some Scotch-Brite and even polish the case, which is sort of like what was happening back in the tumbler. You can see it does a fairly decent job trimming to length. There's another option though. You can use this handheld powered screwdriver. There's a shell holder on the end here where we'll place the cases. We'll grab a 223 case and put it in the shell holder. Tighten it down to lock it in place. Now we're going to use the same Lee ball cutter with the length gauge. And that pin goes down through the flash hole and bottoms out against the lock stud behind the case holder and trims it to length. Now we're going to use the Lee chamfering tool to do inside and outside neck chamfering, just like we did back on the zip trim. So there we are, chamfering the inside. Now I'm chamfering the outside. And you can see nicely trimmed case, ready to reload. We'll do this one more time, a little bit different this time. Go ahead and use the same cutter to cut to length. You can feel it cutting and you can feel it stop cutting. When it stops cutting, then you can go ahead and stop. So a lot of this process is done by feel. Now we're going to use an L.E. Wilson chamfering tool. This one's made for 50 BMG, so it's kind of big, but it does work for a 223. So chamfer the inside, chamfer the outside, and you'll notice this tool is really sharp, so you don't want to do much chamfering. The whole idea here is to just barely take the sharp edges off. You don't want to make it sharp by chamfering it. Now my favorite method, using the milling machine to trim the cases to the proper length. I've put the shell holder into the machining vise, and now I've got a 5/8 inch high-speed steel end mill in the milling machine to cut to length. I'm using the vertical depth stop on the milling machine to control the length that I trim to, then chamfer as before. And you'll see it's a really beautiful piece of brass, nice and square, really nice quality of cut, almost doesn't need any chamfering at all, it's such a nice cut. One safety point, you'll notice there's a long traverse coming down here before it ever gets to the brass. That trimmer really needs to be pretty far above the work surface. You don't want that rotating end mill anywhere near where your hands will be when you're loading brass, because you really wouldn't want to get your fingers caught in that. We'll chamfer this one. And another point, you can come down pretty quickly when you're making that air cut getting down to it, but when you get down to the very last little bit of vertical travel, you should slow down where it just starts to hit the brass and make that trimming rather slow. If you try and go too fast trimming, it'll catch into the brass and snag, and it could deform the top of the brass and you'll end up having to scrap that piece. So again, just mildly chamfer the inside and outside of the case. And there are 3 cases trimmed to length and chamfered. Let's see how we did on the lengths. So 1.756 inches. Another 1.756 inches, so very repeatable cut there. That's quite a bit better than could be done with some of the other trimming methods. 1.755 inches, so only 1/1000th of an inch shorter on one of them. Another possible way to chamfer the inside and outside of the case necks is with something like this RCBS case prep center. It has 5 rotating spindles and will also allow you to de-burr the flash holes or clean the primer pockets or uniform the primer pockets. Now on to the final step 6, priming the cases. The spent primer has been removed, We're ready to reprime. A lot of people like handheld priming tools like this Lee Auto Prime. The tray at the top there holds the primers and the shell holder goes in above that. This is kind of handy because you can prime cases while watching television or something, but I prefer going back to the bench and using my single stage Lee Classic press and using the safety prime to push the new primer into the primer pocket. The safety primer there looks kind of like a Pez candy dispenser, but it loads the primers into the primer holder, and then that presses them in on the downstroke. There's a really good feel to it. You can really tell what you're doing. Anyway, that's all there is to case preparation. Hope you've enjoyed it and gotten something out of it. I do essentially the same process for about any rifle cases, 308, 50 BMG, pretty much any of them, so this same process will work for just about any rifles you do. Hope to see you out on the range.